group today of people who are fairly experienced, but there might also be some of you who really are going through this for the first time. So first message is, don't be panicked. There's maybe quite a lot to cover, but this is a flexible framework, and I think that's very good news for all of you as suppliers. The council's keen to get as many good companies on as possible, but it's not a race to the top in the sense that maybe only the top 5 will get through, or first past the post. So if you can take the time and follow the instructions for the tender, really a good, regardless of your size, it's really all about you and your experience. We've worked with quite a lot of care at home companies in the past, and that's certainly my impression, is that you're really fully up to date with everything that you do on a daily basis. And okay, it might not all be as well documented sometimes as you want, but in my experience from tenders, there's nothing to beat actually sitting down as a team and tackling the questions together and just drawing on your day-to-day experience of what you do in practice. So today I'm going to start off with a very basic sort of how to register and how to find the contract notice. We'll do that quite quickly. And then I'm going to go on and have a look at some of the various packages, if you like, of the buyer's documents, because that's absolutely essential to setting yourself up to approach the tender properly. I'll cover quickly the Q&A system as well that Fran had mentioned, because that's, I think you'll all be aware, if you're registered now for the tender, there's a lot of questions coming and going, but it looks like the council are being pretty prompt to get some good answers out for these. The tender itself is split into 2 different sections, and this is very common for public sector tenders. And the first part is this strange document that we call the single procurement document. It's effectively a way of you documenting information about your company, your organisation as it stands at the moment. It used to be called a sort of pre-qualification questionnaire. It's now called the SPD. So we're going to take you through the different sections that you need to fill in for that. In the past, that might have been issued as a Word document, but now on PCS, it's an online module. And it can be a wee bit tricky to use sometimes. So we'll go through that. I'll be doing it on the slides, and we'll then go live onto PCS to show you step by step how to go through that and the various sections that you might find a bit more difficult if you've not done these before. So that's the first stage of the tender. The second stage is what we call the quality or the technical submission. I think it's sometimes referred to also as the award questionnaire. And I can see that the council's issued quite a detailed questionnaire for all of you to fill in as a Word document and then upload it to the system. So that final uploading and submitting is part that we'll cover as well. So a lot to get through. As I say, I'm going to go through the initial training on slides, simply because that gives you a reference point then that Fran will send these out to you afterwards. So don't worry about taking notes, you'll get the full slides later on today. So just very briefly to say, Public Contract Scotland, for any of you who are not familiar with it, is the portal where all public sector tenders over a certain value, over £50,000, have to be published. So it's an area where, going forwards, if you were to expand and bid into other areas, you can set up and get your email alerts. And in this case, it's also, as well as an advertising portal, it's the place where the council has chosen to set up the actual tendering system. So it's called a post box, and I think hopefully some of you have actually registered and got in to have a good look at that already. So very quickly, if you haven't registered already, it's a very straightforward process. You get on to the publiccontractscotland.gov.uk website, and on the right hand side is the register button, or you log in if you're registered already. You will be registering as a supplier, so there's another button here that does the same thing, and you'll have a fairly straightforward, I would say, form to complete. There's a couple of areas where you might want to just get a bit of guidance. They have a funny NUTS code, which just refers to the region. It's a drop-down list, so assuming that most of you are Argyll and Bute area, there will be a region that covers that. And then you're asked if you're third sector. Now, this doesn't make any difference to whether you can tender or not, but it is something that the PCS team finds it useful. So third sector is a charity, social enterprise, community interest company, any sort of not-for-profit. You would tick the box there. So fill in the form, confirm your details. And you'll get your, you can set your own passwords and you'll get your confirmation and verifications through and you're ready to go. So once you do log in to PCS, you're actually, if you want to find the care at home contract, normally what I would do, and particularly if I'm looking out for tenders that I know are about to be published, for example, I would use search for buyers tab on the main bar at the top of the PCS portal. So in this case, you type in Argyll and Bute, click on search for buyers, and it's actually brought up two organisations here, but clearly this is the council one, and that's your live link then through to their Argyll, Bute and Council website. And it's what they call their buyer profile. So every public body has a buyer profile on PCS. So you get the organisation details, contacts and so on, but the one that you're looking for is the current contract notices. Just for information, if you are using this later on for doing other searches, future contracts can be quite useful and tell you about upcoming maybe frameworks that are due to come out in the next year or so. And you can also look at contract awards and look at some of the previous contracts that have been awarded. But in this case, it's the current notices, and here's the one that we're looking for, care at home services. It confirms the deadline, and it also confirms this little key icon here tells us that the tender is going to be submitted through the postbox on PCS. There is another portal used for public sector called PCS Tender, confusingly, and that would have taken you way to another portal completely. So I think it's quite good that they've chosen PCS, so you're staying in this environment. So click on the link, Care at Home Services, and it then brings up what they call the contract notice. This is important. So every contract notice is where the buyer needs to give full details in this area here, the full notice text of what is the tender, what are the deadlines, but most importantly, what are what they call the selection criteria. In this tender's case, it's things like insurance. So there's certain levels of insurance that you must have or commit to. In some tenders, it might be turnover. They're not using that in this one, which is good. Also would refer to things like what memberships or certifications do you need, which obviously in the care at home sector is very important. So normally, rather than, I would record my interest obviously and download the documents, but I tend to read this full notice text first. And I'm also looking for this one here where it says has ESPD. So that used to stand for the European Single Procurement Document. And it says yes here, so I know that I need to watch out for the SPD online module to fill in that first stage information. So click on record your interest and you'll go through another couple of windows and the documents will then be downloaded into your what they call the interest box. So save here and then you'll get a notice like this on your interest list. Your interest list might, I mean, I know mine has quite a few documents there, so you might need to scroll down a little bit. And again, you can get the link. And what will happen now, because you've recorded your interest, is that when you click, you'll then be able to access all the documents. Okay, so if you go into your interest list and then click on it, you'll see now that you've got the full text, but also here the documents, and you've got a tab for the Q&A and various other contacts and so on. The Q&A, as I say, is the only way to contact the council for any discussions or questions about the tender. So this is the important part for the single procurement document. So initially, obviously, you'll read the full text. We'll talk shortly and come back to the documents, but this is where the online SPD module is accessed. In the past, this online module was first introduced, we had very anxious phone calls from quite a number of clients who had left their tender submissions very late on PCS, uploaded all their documents, thought they'd got everything absolutely right, and went to submit it and didn't realise that the SPD was still sitting in this postbox and had to be fully completed. And I do actually know of more than one client who failed to get their tender in because they noticed too late that that was required to be done. So a general word of advice for all of you, please leave plenty time before the deadline on the 16th, just to make sure everything's done properly. Okay, so this is the view of what's in the documents. There's obviously quite a lot here because there's separate documents for the to-pay information for each of the lots. I'm assuming everyone's familiar with to-pay, transfer of undertakings legislation. But if there are any questions, I'm not an expert, but you can perhaps raise them and we can pass those on if they've not already been answered by the team. So we've got the one that I would watch out for first always is this one here, the ITT, Invitation to Tender document, because that's the one that has all the instructions about how to put your bid together, in particular how it's going to be evaluated and the scoring, any attachments that you can or can't include, and so on. So this one in particular, I would always open and read first. And then you've got this appendix, for example, on the monitoring. So that's going to be important to know in terms of reporting, for example, what expectations there are. There's what they call an extracted response. So for each of the different sets of lots, and that's where you fill in your quality response. So that's quite good that that's been extracted separately. If you click on these, they'll download straight away individually, or you can click on this and download them as a zip file, and it just maybe makes it a lot easier to download and then save on your laptop. This is a particularly important stage, and I think from our experience for well, about 14 years now, we've been working on tender into the questionnaires and start filling in your name, company details and so on. But it's absolutely crucial to try and resist that and to make sure that you read all the relevant documents first. Watch out, obviously, in the invitation to tender. There are also some pages with certificates which have to be completed and signed. I see a question that's gone in recently as well to say that you need to put a signature and verification at the bottom. Read the specification in the ITT. So make sure, obviously, that you're absolutely clear. And what I would tend to do as I'm going through the specification is to have the questions beside me, the award questions, the technical questions, and just make even handwritten notes and say, right, well, here's this part of the spec. Which question does that relate to? And start to make some sort of matrix, if you like, to match the spec, and then it makes sure that in your answers you don't miss out vital parts of the specification. Obviously, if to-pay applies, there's various documents there, and really this is your opportunity when you're reading through these documents to start asking the questions. And I can see certainly from the Q&A so far that everyone's been quite attentive, I think, to the details. Don't be scared to ask anything. The buyer can't see who's asking the question on PCS. So even if you feel it's something, you know, that maybe you should know, or you feel a bit stupid, seriously, much better to get the question in and get a confirmation. Do watch out before you put the question in. Make sure that you've checked what's been asked already and answered. It's a bit annoying for the buyer if people keep submitting the same question over and over again. So that's the document check. The Q&A system, again, fairly straightforward. So you just click on Ask a New Question. You've got till the 10th of May. So there's going to be a period where the questions will be closed down. And in fact, this Ask a New Question tab won't be available anymore. So don't delay with your questions. And this is the format. Hopefully, most of you have been able to see that. The question with the answer. And as the answers build up, you can download these as a kind of simple report and scan through them more easily than the whole list. Okay, so Q&A system, very straightforward. Don't put your name or any sort of identifying details in your question either, please, because that normally would obviously be shared with everyone as well. In the invitation to tender ITT document, the methodology for evaluation is very important to look at before you start to fill in the forms. So for stage one, part one, obviously there's no score, that's just information about you as a bidder. The exclusion grounds is a big long list of reasons why you might be excluded from bidding, and they range from some very serious criminal activity, which obviously you'll say no to. Have you paid your taxes and social security, which obviously you say yes to. But towards the end of the exclusions, there might be things where it's possible that you might say, yes, this applies to us. I'm thinking of maybe health and safety. If you've had, I don't know, a prohibition notice or an improvement notice from the health and safety executive. It might be you've had a member of staff where there's been an employment tribunal process. So in those cases, you can declare yes, but it doesn't automatically exclude you. But you do need to give an account of what you did to make sure that that situation didn't happen again. And that would still allow you to pass this exclusion stage. And the final part of the SPD is the selection criteria, this part 4. Again, it's a pass-fail. The suitability includes questions about your care inspectorate registrations. The economic and financial standing only asks you, I think initially, about your insurance. So again, do you have the level? If not, are you able to get it? So that will get you a pass. Technical and professional ability is actually scored. So this is an important one, and this is where you will be asked to provide an example of one contract or project or activity, if you like, that's similar in scope to the care at home for Argyll and Bute. And the council have confirmed, again, I see this morning in the questions that it's only one example needed, because that might be for some of you, you only have one contract or agreement, and it might also be with Argyll and Bute, and that's absolutely fine to include that as your one example. The important part, and we'll probably come back to this later on, because this is scored, you need to make sure that you give a good account of the project or contract. So you'll be asked for some basic information, so the start and finish date, or is it an ongoing contract, possibly the value, the name of a contact person, you know, what's the title of the contract if you have it. It might not be a strict contract, but you will also be asked for a description, and that's where you need to make sure that you get ideally a 4 out of 4 score. So what we would normally advise is a nice clear list of maybe bullet points on what were the different components of the service. Very important, who are the service users, the people who are cared for, in terms of age profile, additional needs, anything at all that you can describe for the individuals. some of your management approaches. So really kind of tell the whole story. Your team, have you been involved in any community benefits, any environmental aspects, any use of technology? So really as long a list as you can think. It doesn't need to be hundreds of pages long, but try and just have a nice kind of fairly detailed description and bullet points to cover what you've actually delivered, and that will get you your 4 points. And the final part on the SPD, again, can be quite challenging. It's listed as quality assurance schemes and environmental standards, but I think it's been confirmed now that what they're actually looking for is quality assurance and health and safety. So that's a wee bit confusing. And what the SPD asks for is, do you have, in the case of quality, ISO 9001, which is a recognised third-party accreditation, or an equivalent? And if you don't have a quality management system, which involves somebody from outside coming to audit you, you have to say no, but you can then describe and still get a pass if you describe well your own quality management system. So that typically would include a quality policy, some sort of quality assurance. So how at each stage of the care at home service, what, how do you check that you're doing things properly? To some extent, I would have to say argue that the Care Inspectorate registration actually is a third-party quality assurance scheme. But if you don't have ISO 9001, it might be good to also just confirm that you do have these sort of quality assurance measures. I would also be looking to say that I've got a complaints procedure formally documented, that there's customer feedback, service user feedback. So how do you know that you're doing well? That might include feedback from, say, the council, if that's your client, or other clients. Quality training. So again, that could be technical training. It's not just about health and safety. The whole kind of service user relationships, that's all performance and quality related as well. So all of these things you can describe very well as your, what I would call your quality management scheme. And the same applies for health and safety. So if you don't have one of the kind of, well, ISO or one of the what they call SSIP recognised schemes, you will still be able to say, yes, we do have a health and safety policy, we've got training, we've got checks, we've got reviews, audits, and so on. When we go online, I'll show you when you do click on the No button, there's actually a series of questions that will give you guidance on what additional information you need to provide. Okay, so that first stage, the SPD, already has a fair amount in it. So if you haven't looked at that yet, I would say that's one to get started on ASAP. Okay, and that's just a confirmation of these part 4 questions. There will be what they call an independent risk report, that will normally be done by the council, and they will come back if that highlights any financial risk, and you would then have an opportunity to provide reassurance in some form. There is a question towards the end about the percentage of subcontracting. So again, it normally just requires a number there, but possibly just to put in if there is somebody that you're subcontracting to. Care at home, I find it rare, I suppose, but that's maybe something we can just discuss later when we come to the questions. Okay, and then the second part of the response, again, this is us still talking about the evaluation methodology. The ITT obviously tells you the different questions that you'll need to ask, but also importantly, what the weighting is in terms of the score. You'll see that some are 0%, but they are mandatory for completion. So do make sure, even if they're not scored, that you get those filled in. Sometimes people will say sort of tender training, well, it's 40%, so we need to really make a good effort with this question. We don't maybe added value. We don't need to worry so much about that. I have to say my approach is really just put as much as you can possibly into all the responses, because maybe less so in this situation, because there's going to be a lot of people that will be invited onto the framework. But if you're in a more competitive situation, you can lose really by 1 or 2 marks. So you don't want to slacken off perhaps for some of the questions. Give it really as much as you can to answer those. This one here, D, just as we're passing, added value. And I think it maybe also includes perhaps innovation. One of the areas that's can be, I remember doing training with an organisation that provided supported living. It was quite a few years ago, but it stuck in my mind because they brought a lot of their frontline team together, not just the management, but some of the team leaders. And they had the most fantastic kind of brainstorming on added value and innovation. And it turned out that the team on the front line had the most amazing real life situations where they'd gone in, they'd solved a problem, they'd really gone like the extra mile. And it just created the most fantastic kind of hands-on evidence, if you like, that really lifted their tender scores and made a huge difference. So that consultation with the team to get ideas in that area, I would highly recommend. Okay, so once you've read all the documents, you will need to get a bid plan together, and obviously you need to look at the responses, get your questions out, and then importantly, obviously this team meeting and the check with the frontline staff. Pay particular attention to this idea of the win themes. So you are in a sector where a lot of companies will be writing very similar things. Now that's fine and it's very good because you do need to show the basic response to all your questions. But if the questions in terms of the scoring table, to get from a good to an excellent, you do need to add in evidence, really, not just your opinions, but evidence of why your approach gets better outcomes for the people that you're looking after, for example. So this idea of evidence, so don't do the we're a fantastic person-centered company, we go the extra mile, we'll exceed your every dream. That kind of opinion, really, content isn't going to get you the scoring that you need. So your bid plan needs to get some deadlines in for your first drafts, for your reviews and some final submissions if you haven't done that. And try if you can to get a reviewer of all your tender documents that's maybe not been so closely involved. It's very easy to start drowning a little bit in the content. You've got quite a challenging tender, I would say, from my experience, given the number of questions, and having someone who can read your answers and then go back to the spec and tell you maybe things that you've missed, I think would be invaluable. You've also got a very challenging word limit, I would say, too, on a lot of these. So I think it's good that you maybe start with your big answers, but try and maybe even get some help from someone who's not so close to it to try and boil those down to make sure that you meet the word limit. And also check if there's anything that needs like contract reviews or legals or signatures. Once you're online and you've clicked on this post box, you'll then, for the online SPD, have to go through this first stage of creating a response. So click on the post box, click on create, and it's then going to create the area where you're going to upload all the documents. You'll see here now as well on this one, so this is your notice response list, but there's also a dispatch list. So that's where you can check at the end of the process to make sure absolutely that everything's been dispatched. Okay, so once you've created the space, at the top, there'll be an area which has your name and organisation details, and underneath that is where you're going to find this SPD response. And if you've not clicked on this already, the first option you get is to generate the SPD. Click that and it'll take you into the forms. We'll see these later when we go online. And then you can keep going in and out of that SPD module as much as you want to just build up your answers bit by bit. You don't need to do it all in one go. When you come out and want to go back in again, it will give you this alternative edit SPD response. When, I don't think this is on the slides, but once you've actually submitted your SPD module on the system, it'll say view SPD response, and you'll know at that point that it's been logged. So when we get onto the SPD with this new online module, there's various tabs. The first two here, the procurement details, are filled in by the council. The details, which is probably largely pre-populated from your profile on PCS, and then one on representative details, and that's normally where you fill in the name of the business owner or the director or the person kind of responsible with authority to submit the bid. Now, you don't see step 2 at all on this page. You've got to click on representative and fill that in, and then go on to next, and then it takes you into the step 2 answers. And there's various forms. There's an information tab here, and this is where you'll fill in the lots that you want to submit for, the geographical areas. A bit more on bidder information, usually whether you're an SME, the size, but importantly, in this section, bidder information is if you're bidding as a consortium. So we'll come to that once we go into the online version, but you'll be required to put in the name of other partners. They themselves might have to submit some single procurement document information on a separate document as well. So that's important if you're bidding and or subcontracting. The exclusions are the ones I mentioned earlier, the yes, nos, as we call them. So again, it looks like a big long list, but it's quite quick to go through and just fill in your details, your yes, no responses. And then the selection ones are these ones that we spoke of earlier, including your example project, care inspectorate, and quality management, health and safety. Okay, so these are the suitability and so on. Once you've filled in all your responses, you get an option to have a look at the summary, and that's good because it will highlight in red anything that you're missing. You have to type in your name of the person that's signing it off, I think their position, location, date, and so on. If you don't do that, you won't be able to lock and finalise. You've got various buttons at the top as you go along. You can save and exit, and it'll give you the option to save or to save and lock. You can export it, your response, as Word, PDF, and so on, which can be quite, I tend to do that, and just store it for reference. But as I say, at the end of the process, if there's still information that's missing, you will only get the option to save only. If you filled everything in, the system then lets you save and log. So that's the SPD online modules. As I say, because it's online, it's to some extent it might be easier to fill in than a Word document, but it's something that you do need to make sure that you've done that. And I probably recommend that you do that and get it maybe not quite locked, but ready just to press the button and then move on to your quality responses. The format on PCS is this, what we call the post box. So underneath the your workspace, underneath the SPD is the supporting documentation section. And the format here is you type in a description for your document, you then click on choose file, and it then takes you to whatever, your laptop, your system that you're working on, and you then need to go to the folder where you're holding all your documents. I would recommend absolutely that you create a folder called Upload, and you only put in that folder the documents which are finalised, ready, approved, and ready to upload. If you don't do that at this point, this is where you're in quite a serious risk of uploading maybe a last but one or two version of a document, still full of comments, full of gaps, and so on. So create that upload file, which means when you click on choose, you can go straight to that and select from that area. You click it, the name will come up here, and then you add. And it attach documents, and you just start building up your list then of documents here as a test. At any point you can tick that and delete it if you think, oh, it's the wrong one, or I want to change it. So as long as you've not dispatched, you can just keep uploading and uploading, changing documents as you go through if you have to. So as you're going, you can save and exit, and that will take you back to the workspace. Or once you're finally ready and checked everything, you can dispatch, and a code will come up with a reference number saying this confirms your dispatch. If at any stage between then and the deadline, you suddenly remember something where you really need to go back and change it or edit it, you can do that. So you withdraw, you edit, and then you resubmit. Again, just checking that absolutely everything is correct. So just some very quick tips. I think I've probably covered quite a lot of these as we'll be going through. So definitely do the planning before you do the writing, especially where you've got this big restriction on numbers, but also the, to get the good points through. I can do it handwritten quite often as well. It doesn't need to be particularly, complicated, but just to make sure that you cover all the points in all of the questions that you're given. I think the council has confirmed there are some areas where you can use diagrams and you can upload those or include it in your Word document. So things like a Gantt chart, I think, was suggested as one that could go through, an organisation chart maybe. Don't cross-refer to other responses because you won't be, every answer will be only scored on what's in your actual answer there. And don't include web links. If you are attaching documents, obviously, it's a good idea to make sure you've got your name in the footer and any other attachments as well. So I think I said earlier that the word limits, don't write to the word limits. So write as full an answer as you feel you want, and then find ways to cut back the response. I've had some horrific word limits to deal with before. And we've ended up, we've got bullets, we've written stuff that's in almost like text writing. So it doesn't read particularly prettily. It's not like a lovely literature draft, but all we've tried to do is pack in as much as we can to the answer, regardless of what it actually looks like. And you want to personalize it. So that's very important. So don't, necessarily fill in sort of generic cut and paste. Make sure that you're referring to what the council has put forward in their requests, the locations, the localities, any sort of references that reads that it's relevant to Argyll and Bute. Evidence, not opinions, covered already. And remember, obviously, it's that the council is keen to get on, so try not to get too worried. Just focus on getting the best responses that you can for the answers that are there, the questions. There is help for using the PCS system, and we'll also attach a user guide that's just been published now, which will come to you with the slides on how to use the SPD module. So I'm just going to stop sharing just now, Fran, for this one here. And then just go back to share on the live demo page and get it. Can you see it? Okay, for PCS.
No, we're on WebEx just now. Your WebEx joining details have come up. Is it maybe a different screen?
Okay.
There we go. PCF. Oh, gone.
Oh, I'll try that again. Sorry, I did it too fast. better? It might take a wee while just to come through.
Starting to share, just a wee bit of a delay. The wonders of technology. Fantastic when they work properly. There we go. Public Contract Scotland home screen. Thanks, Jill.
Excellent, great. So just very quickly, I think we've covered the search the buyer and how to find the contracts. I'm just going to go straight into my suppliers area and show you in particular the online SPD module. So the interest area is down here. My interest list is rather full, as you might see. So here's the one.
Jill, we're still
And
in
here, care at home services.
We're still in
Ah, that's strange. It's not moved on. Let me just stop and start again.
I was hoping it was just a wee bit of a delay again, but it didn't catch up with you.
Yes, it's just just share that again. I don't know if there's anything in the settings that could.
No, the only thing is sharing application versus sharing screen. Maybe if you share your screen and then open up on your screen, that might speed it up a wee bit. Okay, so we're on notice details.
So screen and application. I think try screen then rather than application, or
yeah. Bear with us, guys, while we sort this out. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have via the live chat, which is a little speech bubble down round about your clock area. There we go. We're in Public Contract Scotland now. We're in notice details.
Notice details, great. Okay, well, let's see what happens. So go to Postbox. I'm sorry, it doesn't help that the PCS system's very slow as well. Are you seeing that now if I just scroll down?
Not yet. Technology slow today, isn't it? There we go. That's us. We're on your interest list now.
Okay. So just back up to the top. Yes, so here's the care at home services. I've already created the workspace, so I just need to go in to now edit that. Let's check that that's coming through, Fran. So I'm now looking at edit SPD response.
No, we're still on the interest list.
Just leave it a wee bit.
There we go. That's us. You can now see
sorry about this, folks. Just quickly, so click on the edit. Just before we leave this, actually, I'll just show you down below. So this is where where you're going to be uploading your questionnaires once they're completed, any certificates. So you type your description, choose the file and add, and then it would add in down below. So I'll just focus, because it's very slow, we'll just focus on the SPD for the time that we've got just now. Sorry, it's just buffering at this side as well.
There we go. Nothing's happening.
You see that now? SPD response?
Yes, yes, they're there.
Great. So company details will come up more or less automatically. There's nothing particularly complicated there. Representative is where you would fill in on this separate list here, and then it will come up with the representative. And then, is that coming through?
Yes.
Yeah. I click on next. It's buffering again. This is always a slow bit. I'll not go through all the different tabs. I'll just choose one of the selection ones at the end, which I think are the most important. As you're going through this, you can save and exit at any time. So here's, hopefully you can see the step 2 criteria answers. Information tab is where you'll be asked about the lots. Bidder information is where we discussed about the consortia. The exclusions are where I will show you one answer for this because it's an important system strange thing. Can you see this one, Fran? Common law offence of conspiracy?
You can see the, yep, I have, that's changed.
Yeah. Great. So your answer generally for these ones are all no, but you must also answer this bit at the bottom, otherwise the system won't let you submit. So you answer no, but you also click to say no, it's not available electronically. And you follow that throughout. So any answers that you see here that have this double kind of question, you need to make sure that you answer both parts. So there's quite a lot under exclusion. And then, sorry, under selection, this is where you'll follow these different sections. So suitability, you would say yes, because this is where you need to upload your care inspectorate and any other sort of registration content. Economic and financial is where you'll be asked about your insurance. Technical and professional ability, they've provided a format here for your relevant examples. So you're only expected to put one in, and this is like, I think it's about 10,000 characters. So that will give you, that's a reasonable amount of maybe like a sort of half, 3/4 of a page, possibly maybe more actually, maybe up to a page or so of content to describe. And there's instructions here, the value, the dates to and from, details of the customer, but also in particular this description. Quality assurance, so again, it says you must hold UCAS, but in fact, you can also have your own documented policy. So if you click on read more here, this is where you get the list of, I think it's about 8 or 9 different processes. So in your response, you need to describe what you've got, and it probably would be at a later stage in the process, you might be asked for the actual evidence of training, your policy documents, management reviews, and so on. Okay, so that's for that one. And then health and safety below it, again, there's a similar list of all the different elements that if you don't have formal accreditation, you need to be able to show what you do have in place to answer these various questions. So those 2 parts can actually be quite a lot of work, I would say, and you've only got the 10,000 characters left to fill in for both quality and health and safety management. So to me, some of it might be here's what we've got in place, but they'll come back later and ask for examples at a later stage. Okay, so if we just save that, and it says save only. Take a wee while just to run through. You can then go to this summary, and that's where you'll be able to see how much you have or you haven't filled in. Sorry, it's just a wee bit slow in coming through. You'll notice here as well, there's actually an SPD control panel where you can already pre-populate some of the information and store it and reuse it for future exercises. So this one here, just very quickly, you'll see it will come up in red for anything that's not been answered. Okay, so if I save and exit, you'll see save and log would be highlighted if I had filled in any